Hey, gang, welcome back. That's very presumptuous of me to assume that you've been here before. Well, if you have been here before, welcome back. And if this is your first time, welcome. This is not how I wanted to start things. But here we are. I could edit this out, but I'm not going to. Or if I do edit it out, you'll never know because you won't hear it. All right, I'm going to start over. Hey, gang, welcome to this episode of Parasite Eyes where we talk about Kiss. We are going through the albums, and we are up to one of my favorites, which is Rock and Roll Over. Last time we talked about Destroyer, of course, because we're going in order. So Destroyer was a bit of a controversial, that's kind of like a stretch. I mean, controversy over a band like Kiss and their album. I guess among the fan base, controversial could kind of fit. Very different from all their previous output, as in it was a bit overproduced, I guess would be the expression, but depending on who you ask. Compared to the earlier albums, it was certainly much more produced. Whether it's over or not is up to overproduction is in the ear of the beholder. After the grandiose production of Destroyer, they wanted to kind of go back to like a more straightforward rock album without all the bells and whistles. On Destroyer, they used Bob Ezrin as a producer, and he was definitely a big part of why it was so grandiose and or overproduced, depending on who you ask. They did not bring Bob back for this one, which is kind of surprising, considering the success of Destroyer. But maybe also not that surprising because Ace and Peter did not seem to like working with Bob. Although I'm sure Peter liked the spoils of working with Bob because Bob, for all intents and purposes, made Beth into what it was, and Peter got songwriting credit on that one. So I'm sure Peter liked that. I think the official story is that's why they didn't bring him back, Bob. Also, Bob was kind of a maniac. Bob was, I think Bob was, he liked his cocaine. Yeah, I think that's well documented. I don't want to like put that out there. It's funny because I'm always like, well, why didn't they do this? Why didn't they do that? There's also such a thing as just like scheduling. Maybe Bob wasn't available. You know what I mean? Maybe Bob had already booked another gig. So anyway, they did not go with Bob. They went with Eddie Kramer, who produced Alive, which was like their breakthrough, and also their first demo that basically like got them their record deal. So it's kind of surprising that they didn't work with Eddie Kramer sooner than they did. I think that Eddie Kramer kind of should have been like their George Martin in a way because, I don't know, I feel like out of all their producers, he seemed to kind of like get what they were going for the most and really like kind of brought between Alive, this album, Love Gun, like, I don't know, I just feel like he kind of like, he got it. He knew how to make them sound. Bob Ezrin got real big with the production, and grandiose is the word I keep going back to, but like Eddie Kramer was like, well, we don't need to do that, we just need to like, and it worked with Alive, obviously, I think that was the initial thing. So it's kind of interesting to me that they didn't use Eddie Kramer for Destroyer after Alive, but once again, I don't know the story. Maybe Eddie wasn't available. I don't know. Interesting thing about this is that they recorded this at a theater, not in front of like a live audience, like Alive, but they did record it in a theater. So I think in a way to try to like capture or recapture that like live sound, without like having an actual audience. Ace has no songwriting credits on this. Even like co-writes. I know on Destroyer he only had a co-writing credit. I think on like Flaming Youth. So kind of interesting that he did not have any co-writes on this. I think this and Love Gun, if you're listening to this, I assume you're a Kiss fan, but if you're just listening to this out of curiosity and you're not, I've used Beatles comparisons before because I'm also like a massive Beatle head. And listen, I'm fully aware that Kiss and the Beatles are two very different things. But I do like to kind of, and maybe this ruffles some feathers. Anyone, like, how dare you compare Kiss to the Beatles? But bear with me. I think of Rock and Roll Over and Love Gun as like Rubber Soul and Revolver. Only in that they are like I remember watching like Beatles Anthology, and even George was like saying, I was just about to do my George impression, but I'm not going to do that to you because it's bad. But basically saying like how he even would be like, he always thought of Rubber Soul and Revolver. They were like so similar and recorded in somewhat of a same time period in like atmosphere and songwriting and whatever. So I kind of think of these two, like where I would do that with Rubber Soul and Revolver. I'll be like, kind of forget what song I would like think a song was on Revolver and it turned out it was on Rubber Soul and vice versa, whatever. That kind of happens with this and Love Gun, and Eddie Kramer is the producer on both of those. I'm getting really in the weeds here, but or off track, but I think Eddie Kramer was really good at, and it also probably had something to do with just like where they were now. They were like more experienced in their songwriting and everything like that, but they're still rocking, but it's kind of like slick and poppy. Nowhere near as poppy as like it would become with like Dynasty and Unmasked and stuff like that. But like an acceptable level of very catchy. I could see why these albums were like where they really like mainstream America can like latch onto this and be like, all right, this is acceptable. And also people who like rock. Although I guess there was a time when rock was accessible to mainstream America, but not anymore. Anyway, what else? Oh, last thing. So I always like to quote Paul's autobiography. Actually, I think he has two, but the first one, I think it's Face the Music, where all he does is like bash everyone in that book. But one of his bashings takes place when he talks about the recording of this album, where he's basically saying like, with this album, they really wanted to try to get like a good drum sound. They were always unhappy with the drum sound. He was saying like, we wanted to get a massive drum sound like John Bonham, and we had, we told Eddie that, and he tried to do that, but no matter what he did, like the drums never sounded great. And I realized that like it was not the way you record John Bonham. It's just that sound was John Bonham, and Peter was no John Bonham. Yes, I agree. Peter was no John Bonham, but like, I don't know. If I was Peter, I think my response to that would be, well, Paul, you're no Jimmy Page or Robert Plant. You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy to me how much Paul will bash like Peter's, like lack of musical acumen or it's weird because Paul does seem to like admit his limitations and stuff, but bashes Peter's for his limitations. It's just strange. Yeah, Paul's a trip, man. A very is it unself-aware or self-unaware? I don't know. Dude, you get what I'm going for. Having said all that, I love this album. It's great.
Great record.
Excellent album. We learned a lot from
Great
it.
record.
It's funny because I was reading some reviews. I mean, from all the way back then, where I saw a review where it was like, this was a rush job, this album, but it's good, but you could tell it's a rush job. And I was like, I mean, I think they were like, oh, they're trying to like capitalize on the success of the last couple albums, so it's like they're rushing it out, Okay, I kind of get that, but they're always rushing. I feel like they were always putting out like multiple albums a year, you know what I mean? So I don't know that this was should be considered more of a rush job than any of the other ones, but if it were a rush job, I think they did a very good job, a very good rush job. All right, let's talk about the cover because it's one of the greatest covers ever. It's amazing. They come from Destroyer, which is one of the greatest album covers ever, in my opinion, and possibly in yours. At least for Kiss. I mean, I think it could be argued that Destroyer or Rock and Roll Over, either of those could be like considered the best. What are the odds that they're like back to back? And they're like so different. Destroyer seems like more organic. It was like a painting, you know what I mean? And it like feels like hand done. And of course, Rock and Roll Over was done by hand because it was goddamn 1976. They weren't using computers and shit, but it's so like perfect that it almost seems like it was. You know what I mean? Like, it's amazing. Like, just the lines are just like so perfect. And I don't know. I feel like it's like a master class in like graphic design. It's crazy. I mean, God forbid AI. Good luck trying to do that. You some bitch. So the artist was Michael, I'm not sure if it's pronounced Doré. It's Doret. So it's either Michael Doré. Phonetically, it would be Michael Dorette, but I'm going to assume it's Michael Doré. he ended up doing the Sonic Boom cover like 30 years later. When did Sonic Boom come out? Was it 76? 40 years later or something? I don't know. And Sonic Boom, I would imagine, was done on a computer. I mean, I can't imagine that in like whatever year that was, 2010 at least or something, that he weren't using a computer. Then it's like you go back and you look at this one and you're like, okay, this one he wasn't using a computer, and it is so perfect and amazing. It's just like, I don't know. They don't make them like they used to, I guess you could say. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say about this cover. It's just like, it's one of the best covers ever. It's just like a timeless cover. I don't know. Like, so the fact that this came out in like 76, it's just, Jesus. I just can't imagine like going to the record store, seeing this and being like, what is this amazing thing? All right, well, let's talk about the tunes, because that's what we like to talk about. And by we, I mean me. I don't know who. Track 1, I Want You. Listening to this recently after we did the Destroyer episode, and we talked a lot about how, a lot of their initial fan base, a lot of them weren't super hot on Destroyer because of, how different it was from their early records. They weren't like straightforward rocking, from front to back. They had some... they had some wimpy songs like Beth and, Great Expectations, this, that, and the other. So part of me, when I put this on after, thinking about this, diving deep into Destroyer and then this, maybe I'm like kind of like analyzing these more than I did in the past. I think I've always analyzed them because I've been like a mega super fan, which is kind of funny, like analyzing this silliness. But anyway, having said that, I was thinking about the intro to this song, and this being the first song on the album, and how it starts out with that, like soft intro. And I was thinking, I wonder if that was a little bit of a gotcha or something that the band was doing by starting the album like this, because I could imagine maybe if like someone put the needle on, it was like someone who didn't like Destroyer too much, and they're like, all right, I'm going to give these guys another chance. I heard this album's a little more rockin', and then they drop the needle and they have that intro, and maybe they're like, "Oh, are you kidding me? They're starting the album with a wimpy song. These guys are dead to me." And then it kicks in and starts a rockin', and they're like, "Aha, we got you."
Aha! Aha!
I don't know if that was really what they were going for or not, because, I mean, they were using that songwriting technique all the way back on the first album with Black Diamond, and then even a little bit with Rock Bottom, although that one had it was like an instrumental, but, it was kind of like quiet, soft before it kicked into the rockin', although that one went forever. I like it a lot. I like that intro, and I like that song, but the intro went on for a long time. This one, not so much. But yeah, no, so this is it's a cool starter. It rocks. I guess you can't help but kind of compare opening tracks. I mean, we had Detroit Rock City on the last one, which is a pretty amazing opening track. And then after this, you got I Stole Your Love, which is a killer opening track. This one's good, but I don't know if it lives up to either of those two, but that's all right. Listen, they can't all be the best. Although Kiss is the best. You wanted the best, you got the best. Track 2, Take Me. So this is the first of 3 co-writes with Sean Delaney. So Sean Delaney was an important figure in Kiss-tory. He was there from the start, pretty much. I mean, from before they even like put out their first record. He was Bill Aucoin, the band's manager. He was his partner in love and business. Well, I don't know about in business, they were partners per se, but they did work together. And according to Sean, he was the one that kind of like convinced Bill to go and see them. The band had put together like a little showcase thing, and we're inviting people, industry people. And I think Sean was the one that talked Bill into going. From the early days, I guess he was, he kind of was a jack of all trades in the band. He just kind of was like a roadie, driver, and more importantly, I think like he helped them with like the image type stuff and choreography, if you want to call it that. But like, I guess you'd call it choreography. I mean, notably like the like swaying move that they would do on like on Deuce, that kind of back and forth thing that they would do which was awesome. And I think just kind of like helped them like, just figure out like kind of like their stage moves and like, how they would move around wearing these crazy get-ups and shit, As far as songwriting went, I mean, up until Destroyer, all the songs were written by the band themselves. And I think at this point, well, on Destroyer, Bobby Ezrin was helping writing, and then you had Stan Penbridge help with Beth, and so Sean Delaney, he was an important dude, and then after this album, I mean, he co-wrote 3 tunes on this album, but yeah, he didn't do too much more. It's funny, like this album, but then I know on Alive 2, he co-wrote All American Man and Rocket Ride, which is funny because the first line of the song, which is one of the most, can you really pick out like the most juvenile lyric in a Kiss song out of so many juvenile lyrics? But the opening line, put your hand in my pocket and grab onto my rocket. That's the opening line to the song. And then he helped co-write Rocket Ride with Ace on Alive 2. So Sean liked using rocket as a euphemism. And then the other thing after that is, I guess he helped kind of produce and co-write some songs for Gene and Peter's solo albums. So yeah, anyway, Sean was a big deal, a big character in Kisstory. We call that. We call Kiss's history Kisstory because, wordplay. Track 3, Calling Dr. Love. All right, so this was the second single from the album, released February 13th, 1977. Yeah, so this one was, we talked about it on the last episode on Destroyer, but a lot of the demos from Destroyer, Gene would kind of take those and kind of reconfigure them a little bit. And this was one of them, and it was called Bad Bad Lovin', kind of like Good Good Lovin'. You see what he did there? Yeah, and on that demo, if I recall, the verse and the kind of intro and the riff and everything are like identical to this, the lyrics and everything. At least on the first verse. I don't remember the whole thing, but yeah, and then the chorus was the big difference. I just thought of this recently. I don't know why. I guess Gene always just singing about, his sex addiction and having to think of different ways to write a song about how much he loves having some sex. I can't help but think of Spinal Tap when they were talking about Sex Farm. He's like, it's about the very sophisticated topic of sex and putting it on a farm. I was just thinking about this, but replace the farm with a doctor's office. I don't know if that works for anybody else out there, but I don't know. My first time hearing this song, I remember it to this day, and every time I hear the song, which has been hundreds of times at least, I can't help but have this memory. So I've mentioned this before, but when I discovered Kiss, it was in the late 80s, and it was smashes, thrashes, and hits. Being the late 80s, the format I was listening to was a cassette tape, and I was listening to the cassette tape on a Walkman. If there's any young people out there, a Walkman was like it was like your phone, but you had to put batteries in it, and it didn't make calls or go on YouTube or TikTok, but you put a cassette in there, and that's how you listen to music. The first time I ever heard this song, I played it, and I didn't realize as it was playing that the batteries of my Walkman were dying. So the song was playing at like half speed. And I didn't know what was happening. I didn't realize it. I thought that's just the way the song went. I thought it was like kind of like God of Thunder, like it kind of had the same tempo as God of Thunder. So I don't know like when it hit me that wasn't, something weren't right. Something was rotten in Denmark. To this day, I mean, that was goddamn 35 years ago. I can't hear this song without having a flashback to that. Anyway, Calling Dr. Love. I like it. It's a Kiss classic. Am I right? Track 4, Ladies Room. So this was another demo from like the Destroyer era. With Destroyer, I know Bob Ezrin, they were saying like, he rejected a lot of their demos and stuff. Like Bob Ezrin rejected some of these, but didn't reject Great Expectations. So I don't know, Bob. He did a lot of good stuff, obviously, but in case you weren't aware, Gene liked having sex.
Listen, I don't know about you, but I'm very much in the mood for some sexual intercourse.
And he liked having one-night stands. When I think about, meeting in the bathroom in a rock and roll, world, I think about cocaine. I guess some people were also having sex. Gene was not doing cocaine. He was doing sex. Yeah, I like the song. It's cool. You know, we talk about this stuff a lot. Having like so many songs about sex, it is funny and goofy and silly. You know, it's like, come on, guys, can you not come up with something else, Gene? Like, I think on the last episode I made a comment about how Bob Ezrin, he challenged the band to not write what Paul referred to as F me, S me songs, F me, suck me songs. I don't censor myself from swearing too much, but for some reason I don't like to say the F word too much. You know, because I'm trying to get that monetization, baby. But yeah, so it was funny because on the last album, you know, Bob Ezrin kind of challenged them to not write, you know, every song to be about sex, and Paul seemed to kind of like take the challenge a little seriously. Gene not so much, because I kind of joked like Gene cannot write a song that's not about sex. On this album, he's got Calling Dr. Love, where he is a doctor that has sex with you. Ladies' Room, where he takes you to the ladies' room to have sex with you. Love 'Em and Leave 'Em, where he has sex with you and then he leaves.
Bye, Felicia.
Okay, no.
What did he just say?
And then See You in Your Dreams, where I think he has sex with you in your dreams. You have sex dreams about him. So that one's, I'll give him some credit there. In that dream, or in that song, it's sex dream instead of sex reality. Also, Paul, he's like, all right, I answered the call from Bob about not writing songs about sex every song, but Bob's gone. I'm about to write some songs called Mr. Speed and Making Love and Take Me and blah, blah, blah. Also, I kind of joked like this, Gene cannot write a song that's not about sex. And I was waiting for people in the comments section to be like, oh, well, this song's not about sex, that song's not about sex. But yeah, I did not get a deluge of comments about songs that Gene wrote that were not about sex. But I know Deuce, he says he doesn't know what that's about. I think it's about sex. If Gene says he doesn't know what it's about, I assume it's subconsciously about sex, you know. But I do like Ladies' Room a lot. I think I said this before. You just gotta like kind of ignore the lyrics, you know. I don't listen to Kiss for the lyrics. Maybe you do. I don't want to put words in your mouth, because before I think I said we don't. I think I said we don't listen to Kiss for the lyrics. I don't want to put words in your mouth, so maybe you do. Maybe you just like their lyrics and you don't like their music. I like their music.
I like Kiss because they got a hard driving rock beat.
And not so much their lyrics, but I put up with them. Track 5, Baby Driver. Peter and Stan Penridge, who co-wrote Beth, come in with another co-write here. And I gotta give them some credit because this is very different from Beth. And you could imagine, you know, we had a big hit with Beth. Let's try to write another Beth. That's like a one-hit wonder thing. You'll find that a lot of one-hit wonders, they'll come out with like a follow-up track where they try to kind of recreate it, and you really can't do that. So maybe they were smart enough to know like not to do that, or they just were like, well, they couldn't write another Beth, you know. But yeah, no. So I do give them credit for being like, no, we're just gonna write a rockin' jam. The title has always been strange to me, Baby Driver. I always thought that was a weird title. The lyric sounds like it's just about a lady who he likes who drives around. Yeah, I always thought that was a weird title. And then there was a movie called Baby Driver that came out a couple years ago, which I think had like a really popular soundtrack. I never saw it. Is this song on that soundtrack? That might be a little too on the nose, but I just found out recently that there's a Simon and Garfunkel song off of Bridge Over Troubled Water called Baby Driver. So that's weird. And it's a pretty cool tune. What are the odds? 2 songs with a weird name. But yeah, Baby Driver. Pretty cool tune. Do I have anything else to say about it? I do not. Track 6, Love 'Em and Leave 'Em. Did you know that Gene liked to have sex?
Sex!
You like to have one-night stands. Gene writes songs about sex. I think I've made my point. But anyway, this was another reworked demo. The original title, which I find very amusing, was Rock and Rolls Royce. If this Rolls Royce is a rockin', if this Rolls Royce is a rockin', don't come a knockin'. So I remember they made a video for this. You know, when I was a kid discovering Kiss in the late 80s, I mean, they were making videos by the late 80s, you know, in their non-makeup, but I was always like, oh, I wish there were more videos of them in their makeup, you know, but MTV didn't really exist and people weren't making videos as much. I mean, they did. But I always thought, you know, their videos that they made were kind of just them performing, you know, there was never like any like, you know, story. Well, besides Shandy, I guess there was a little storyline there, but we'll get to that. So there's a video of them, and I saw initially on Extreme Close-Up, which I think was like around the Revenge album. There's a video for this song on that. Gene is doing these like really jerky kind of movements. He kind of looks like a puppet or something. I don't know how to describe it. And his hair is very frizzy. I just have to remember that. Ace has a killer guitar solo on here, and that also on the video. Ace is like the coolest dude in the room on that one. He does this cool thing like towards the end of the solo where he like pulls his like strumming hand off, and he like his fretting hand's kind of like hammering on and off or whatever, and he like points to it with his other hand, and it almost looks like he's like using his space magic to like keep the lead going. I don't know. It's pretty cool. It's a cool song. I mean, once again, lyrics are goofy. Most of them are. Track 7, Mr. Speed. I love this song. This is, I'm going to call it, I was going to say probably my favorite song on the album, but you know what? I'm going to commit. This is my favorite song on the album. I don't need to say probably. I'm standing firm. Favorite song on the album. Another Sean Delaney co-write. The riff is just so bitchin' on this song. I texted a buddy of mine a while back and sent him this song, and I was like, do you think that the lady's calling you Mr. Speed? If you're a coxman, such as Paul Stanley, do you think that the lady's calling you Mr. Speed is a good thing? Because to me, that sounds like your lovemaking is over quickly, speedily. So maybe being called Mr. Speed is not a good thing, if the ladies are calling you that, maybe it's not a compliment. Maybe does Paul just not realize that? But then I was thinking maybe he's saying that his lovemaking is so vigorous, like he thrusts speedily, which maybe the ladies like that. I don't know. What do you think he means? I don't know. I'm inviting engagement here.
Engage.
Please leave a comment. Let me know. Or is he saying like he's Mr. Speed, like he can get in your pants quickly, like he'll meet you and then he'll meet you in the ladies' room, He meets you, he charms the pants right off you speedily. But yeah, either way, this song rules. I love it. Yeah, I'm so fast. That's why the ladies call me Mr. Speed. I guess I could go either way. That could have multiple connotations. So let me know what you think. Track 8, See You in Your Dreams. I've listened to all these albums like many, many times, but it was only recently that it dawned on me. I guess I never listened to this album and Gene's solo album like too close to each other. Basically, long story short, Gene re-recorded this song on his solo album, which is just a strange choice because I think it sounds fine here and I don't really see any improvement or anything on there. And from what I've read or heard, he wasn't really happy with like either version. I don't know what he was looking for or going for that he didn't achieve, but yeah, I think it's a fine song either way. It's about a lady. I guess he didn't get to have sex with this one, so she's going to have to settle for having a sex dream about him. I guess this is like a creative... Gene's being creative with his sex song. He's like the Freddy Krueger of sex. He's not going to kill you in your dream like Freddy would. He's going to have sex with you in your dream. So that's better. Better than murdering, having sex. Yeah, I don't know. What else is there to say? I don't really have much to say. This is like the Flaming Youth of the last episode. I think it's a fine song, but I just don't really have that much to say about it. Besides that, Gene had some vision for the song that he just didn't achieve. And he tried again, and from what I understand, it didn't achieve it there either. But I don't know, maybe he did. Or else he would have re-recorded it again for his other solo album, Asshole, which I think he did like the Firestarter cover on from Prodigy. That would be funny, actually, if this song was on there, too. And he put, like, an industrial beat on it. He's like, finally, that's what I was looking for. Yeah, that's it. I got nothing else. For this one. See You in Your Dreams. Track 9, Hard Luck Woman. So this was the first single from the album, released November 1st, 1976. I assume it's kind of common knowledge, but at least to anyone who would be listening to this, that Paul wrote this with Rod Stewart in mind. He wanted Rod to perform it, and you can tell it sounds very much like a Rod Stewart song. Like the intro sounds very similar to You Wear It Well. And I've heard conflicting stories that either Paul did kind of send it to Rod and he just wasn't interested. But then I heard other story that the band or Gene or whatever, manager, whoever, didn't want to give it to Rod because they thought it would be a good follow-up for Peter, a good follow-up to Beth. And, Peter does kind of have a similar kind of raspy quality. It was not anywhere near the success that Beth was, but I guess it was a moderate. Yeah, it was a top 20 hit. I just looked that up. Peaked at number 15. Beth was, number 7? So, yeah, it's pretty good. Pretty close. But yeah, so this was another one that had a video that I remember seeing on that extreme close-up when I was younger. The main thing I remember that video was Paul and Ace playing like a double neck guitars, and they were like playing it together. Like,
these guitars that are like double guitars,
Ace was like spooning Paul while they were playing it, which I thought was pretty cute. Yeah, this is an interesting song in Kiss's catalog. Kind of surprised that Rod never did it later, maybe once it came out as like number 15 on the charts, ain't so not too shabby, right? So I'm kind of surprised that Rod wouldn't have taken a stab at it later on, I'd like to hear that. If anybody knows Rod, let him know that I think it would be a good idea for him to do this song. I saw Rod a couple of years ago, and it was a great show. And then this was the tour right before the next tour where he did that weird thing with like the AI images of like, it was like right after Ozzy died, and he had like these weird AI images of him doing selfies with like Ozzy and Amy Winehouse and Jim Morrison. It was funny because I think we told our friends what a good time we had at the show and how good he was when he came around again. We were like, oh, yeah. And they were like, oh, you should come with us. And we were like, oh, we saw him last time, but you guys should totally go. It was great. And then they went to the one where he did the weird AI pictures, and I felt somehow responsible. Like, sorry, I don't know. He didn't do that when we saw him. See, Rod, so maybe you don't always make the best decisions. Maybe you should have done Hard Luck Woman, and maybe you shouldn't have done the AI selfies. Track 10, Makin' Love. Paul closing out the album with some, let's just say, questionable lyrics. Let's see, what are some of the worst offenders here. I just hate when the girl says wait. Another line. She says stop, baby, go, go, go. I don't like those lyrics. I said this before on an episode. At first glance, you assume Gene is the biggest creep in the band, right? But Paul says, hold my beer. I'm the biggest creep, because Paul really likes to throw in the creepy lyrics. Paul was the one that came up with the on Going Blind, the I'm 93, you're 16 line. Paul came up with the title Christine 16, but then Gene took it and ran with it. So good job on both of you on that one. What is it? Room service. I think he drops the 16, a sweet 16 looking hot and mean, blah, blah, blah. Paul's got the creepy lyrics on lockdown there, unfortunately. But also, when I think of Making Love, this is not what I think of. This is very aggressive for... When I think of Making Love, I'm thinking of like a ballad. On a completely unrelated note, I always thought that the chorus of this song always sounded kind of like unfinished. There's like no backup or harmony or anything like that. We talk about this a lot. Kiss just cranked them out like 2 albums a year, and they were like busy touring and this and that. And like, I feel like on the last album, on Destroyer, the songwriting, Bob Ezrin getting involved and this and that was like more about, because it was just like, not because it was a rush, it was more because they were like trying to make something, more substantial or whatever. Now here you get the like outside songwriters. That almost, it feels a little more like out of necessity, And maybe it was starting to catch up with them here with the songs, maybe Lovin' Leave 'Em's chorus and Making Love's chorus could have used another pass. But I love this record. It's great,
Great record.
Excellent album. We learned a lot from
Great
it.
record.
But yeah, Making Love, it's a cool song. Once again, you just gotta, I sound like a broken record here, but if you ignore the lyric, it's a cool song. Which, once again, you should probably just do that for most Kiss songs. It's a tricky one. I don't know how I feel about Making Love. This sounds like this should have been like a Paul Stanley solo. This should have went on his solo record. Yeah, I don't think there's like any backup vocals whatsoever on the song, which I guess is not always 100% necessary, but maybe the rest of the band was like, we don't want to sing on your weird aggressive song. And the lady said wait, and she said stop. Maybe even the rest of the Kiss were like, all right, Paul, this is too much. Maybe that's why no one else is singing on it. They didn't want to be held accountable. Is this a great album closer? It doesn't really sound like a closer per se. I feel like See You in Your Dreams, which would have made more sense as a closing track. Whether you like that song or not, I feel like some people might not be too hot on that track. Kind of makes sense as a closer. if I were there, if I was Sean Delaney, I would have been like, you know what, guys, let's end it with "See You in Your Dreams." All right, I'm gonna jump in my time machine and tell these dudes. Well, I guess having a time machine would be only one part of the equation. I would also then have to like meet Kiss, get to know them, be there when they were sequencing. The time machine only gets you so far. People think you get a time machine and you can just do whatever. It's only one part of the plan. You got to like still, once you get back in time, you still got to be able to like do the thing. You're not automatically like, you don't have free reign just because you're in the time period. Come on. All right, enough of this. All right, yeah, so Rock and Roll Over. It's great. I love it.
Great record.
Excellent album. We learned a lot from it.
Great record.
You know, I go back and forth. So I'm a big Beach Boys head. All right, I'm going somewhere with this. Bear with me. You're like, why is he talking about the Beach Boys 30 minutes into a Kiss video? So Pet Sounds was kind of the defining Beach Boys album, but then there's a pre-Pet Sounds Beach Boys discography and a post-Pet Sounds Beach Boys discography. And I love them both for different reasons and stuff. I kind of, with Kiss, I consider like Alive. There's like the pre-Alive and the post-Alive, right? At least for the, you know, the makeup era, which, let's be honest, if I'm being honest, that's the era that I like. As far as pre-Alive, you know, I go back and forth between Hotter Than Hell and Dressed to Kill sometimes. I'm like, I don't know, man. I love them both, you know. Post-Alive, Rock and Roll Over and Love Gun. This and Love Gun really just captured, you know, Destroyer was great too in its own way, but it was like a little too far out, a little too weird. I think it just really didn't represent the band, what they really were, where I feel like this and Love Gun, which we'll be talking about next time, they were running on all cylinders. Is that the term? Running on all cylinders? No, it's not. Firing on all cylinders, that's the term. They were firing on all cylinders. Yeah, they were in the groove. They were in the zone. Auto zone. I go back and forth between my post-Alive favorite. We'll talk about Love Gun next time. I don't go on the Facebook too much. I haven't for years, but now that I do this, I find myself on there a little more. And I go on, like, I joined a bunch of Kiss groups. And a lot of times you just get these accounts that are just like posting like, what's your favorite song off of this album? Or, you know, or they'll put up like 4 albums and they'll be like, which one? If you only could choose one, which one is it? This one's got Mr. Speed, but Love Gun's got Shock Me. I mean, but then again, Love Gun's got And Then She Kissed Me. Yeah, looking forward to talking to Love Gun. I think that's kind of the end of the classic era because, you know, after that, you know, we've got our Alive 2. That's going to be an interesting one. We're going to talk about that. We talked about Alive. I mean, but then after that, you know, you got the solo albums like that got crazy, obviously. Then you got Dynasty where it's like a real slapdash affair. I mean, like Peter only plays on the one song that he sings on. Ace coming in, like, I think Ace was like the only member on the songs that he did. You know, it's like they were at that point like barely a band anymore. And then, you know, last thing with Peter on it, blah, blah, blah. It was like, so Love Gun, I think, is kind of the end of like when they were a band. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it. I really do. I would say see you in your dreams, but no, you're not going to see me. Maybe you'll see Gene in your dreams. We'll see you on YouTube or wherever.
Bye, Felicia.
Who's Felicia?
You are.
No, you're Felicia.
Let's just all act like adults.